Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The air in the Port Charles Police Precinct was always a unique blend of stale coffee, industrial cleaner, and low-grade anxiety. But today, a new scent had been introduced, one that Detective Harrison Chase found far more unsettling: the cloying, metallic tang of shock. It clung to the walls of the interrogation room, seeped under the door, and seemed to have permeated the very fabric of his being. He stared at the one-way mirror, his own reflection a pale, grim ghost superimposed over the scene on the other side. On the table, bathed in the unforgiving fluorescent light, lay the case file. It was thick, a testament to weeks of dead ends, frustrating leads, and a city holding its breath. At the center of it all was a single, high-resolution photograph from a traffic camera, grainy but unmistakable. It showed a figure, clad in dark, nondescript clothing, face obscured by a hood and a surgical mask, leaning out of a stolen sedan's window. In their hands was the weapon that had nearly ended Drew Cain's life. For weeks, the entire force, the press, the entire damned city, had referred to this individual as the shooter. The pronoun was always he. The assumption was a given. In their world, violence of this particular, brutal caliber, a calculated, public assassination attempt, was a man's game. They had been wrong. Profoundly, dangerously wrong. Chase's eyes shifted from the photo to the woman sitting calmly in the hard plastic chair. She was petite, with expertly styled blonde hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple, expensive-looking cream-colored sweater and dark slacks. Her hands, resting on the table, were delicate, the nails manicured with a clear, glossy polish. She could have been waiting for a latte, or browsing a gallery, or attending a parent-teacher conference. She was the picture of unassuming, almost fragile, normalcy. Her name was Meredith Mere Dawson. The name had meant nothing at first. A background check revealed a quiet, almost invisible life. A freelance graphic designer, she worked from a small, tidy apartment in a decent, if not luxurious, part of town. Her financials were clean, her social media presence minimal and curated with pictures of sunsets and cafe pastries. She had no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She was a ghost, a non-entity. And that, Chase had come to realize, was the point. It was her greatest camouflage. The break had come from a fragment of a fingerprint lifted from the inside door handle of the abandoned getaway car, a place the shooter, in their haste, had neglected to wipe down thoroughly. It had taken weeks for the lab to find a match, cross-referencing it with databases that went beyond standard criminal records. The print belonged to Meredith Dawson, whose fingerprints were on file from a long-ago background check for a security clearance at a tech firm she had briefly contracted for a decade prior. Chase took a deep breath, the air scraping against his dry throat. He picked up the file, his knuckles white. Next to him, his partner, Detective John Jagger Cates, let out a low, weary sigh. "You ready to do this?" Cates asked, his voice gravelly from too many cigarettes and too many late nights. "No," Chase replied honestly. "But let's go." The door to the interrogation room clicked open, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Meredith Dawson looked up as they entered, her expression one of polite, slightly confused curiosity. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, moved from Chase to Cates and back again. There was no fear in them. No anxiety. Just a placid, waiting calm that was more terrifying than any belligerent outburst. "Miss Dawson," Chase began, taking the seat opposite her. Cates remained standing, leaning against the wall, a silent, imposing presence. "Thank you for coming down to speak with us." "Of course, Detective," she said, her voice soft and melodious. "Although, I must admit, I'm still rather confused as to why I'm here." "Your call was quite vague." She offered a small, tentative smile. It didn't reach her eyes. Chase placed the file on the table but didn't open it. He wanted to watch her, to study her reactions. "We're investigating the shooting of Drew Cain a few weeks ago. I'm sure you've heard about it." A slight frown creased her perfectly smooth brow. Who in Port Charles hasn't? It was all over the news. A terrible, terrible thing. Is he going to be okay? He's recovering, Chase said neutrally. It was a close call. I'm glad to hear he's improving, she said, her tone dripping with a sincerity that felt practiced, like an actor hitting a mark. But I'm afraid I don't see what that has to do with me. Chase decided to skip the dance. He opened the file and slid the traffic camera photo across the table. This is the individual who shot Drew Kane. Taken moments after the incident. Meredith glanced at the photo, her expression unchanged. It's a bit blurry, isn't it? I'm not sure what you want me to see. We've identified the vehicle, Chase continued, his voice steady. It was found abandoned in a warehouse district. We processed it for forensic evidence. He paused, letting the silence stretch. We found your fingerprints inside the car, Ms. Dawson. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed her face. It wasn't panic. It was more like annoyance. The look a mathematician might give when they discover a simple, foolish error in a long, complex equation. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a mask of bewildered innocence. My fingerprints, she breathed, her hand fluttering to her chest. That's impossible. I've never been in that car. I don't even own a car, I use a ride-share service. There must be some kind of mistake. The lab was very thorough. Kate spoke from his position by the wall, his voice a low rumble. No mistake. This is absurd, she said, a note of strained patience entering her voice. Why would I want to shoot Drew Kane? I don't even know the man. I've seen him on the news, of course, with his family, the Quartermaines. But I've never met him. I have no connection to him whatsoever. That's what we're here to figure out, Chase said. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Where were you on the afternoon of October 12th, between 2 o'clock and 3 p.m.? She didn't hesitate. I was at home. Working. I had a deadline for a client's logo design. I was on my computer all afternoon. Can anyone verify that? Kate asked. I live alone, detective. So, no. But my computer activity would show I was logged into my design software and sent emails during that time frame. She said it with the confidence of someone who had already considered this alibi. Computer records can be faked, Chase pointed out gently. Scheduled emails, automated tasks. Her eyes hardened just a fraction. Are you calling me a liar? We're just establishing the facts, Chase replied. The facts, as we have them, place you inside the vehicle used in a violent crime. That's a very serious fact, Ms. Dawson. She leaned back in her chair, the picture of offended dignity. I want a lawyer. Of course, Chase said, nodding. That is your right. But before we call one in, perhaps you can help us understand. Because, frankly, this doesn't make any sense. You have no record. Your life appears quiet. Why would a woman like you be involved in something like this? It was a calculated question, designed to appeal to her ego, to the narrative she had so carefully constructed for herself. He was inviting her to explain, to justify, to tell the story she clearly believed made her actions logical. For a long moment, she was silent, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond Chase's shoulder. The air in the room grew thick, charged with unspoken truths. The polite facade began to crack, not into hysteria, but into something colder, sharper. The placid lake was revealing the jagged rocks beneath its surface. You're right, detective, she said finally, her voice losing its softness, becoming flatter, more analytical. It doesn't make sense from where you're sitting. You see a quiet, unassuming woman. You can't reconcile that image with the person in that photo. Your mind rejects it. It's a cognitive dissonance you're not equipped to handle. She gave a small, cold smile. That has always been the advantage. Chase felt a chill creep down his spine. What advantage? The advantage of being invisible, she said, her eyes locking with his. No one ever sees the quiet woman. She's part of the scenery. A prop. You look right through her. You assume her life is as small and simple as her apartment, as her job. You assume she doesn't have the capacity for grand plans, for deep hatreds, for the kind of resolve it takes to pick up a gun and end a life. She tilted her head. It's a profound and consistent underestimation. And it's why I'm sitting here, and not some panicked, blubbering fool you had to chase down in a seedy motel. So, you're admitting it? Kate's pushed off the wall, taking a step closer. You shot Drew Kane? Meredith's smile widened, but it was a hollow, terrible thing. I'm admitting that you have no idea who I am, or what I'm capable of. Drew Kane was a target. A means to an end. What end? Chase pressed, his heart hammering against his ribs. They were on the precipice. He could feel it. The end of the Quartermain legacy, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every syllable was razor-sharp. Or at least, a significant blow to its heart. The name Quartermain hung in the air, a talisman of power, wealth, and tragedy in Port Charles. It was a name that attracted conflict like a magnet. But this felt different. This wasn't a business rival or a jilted lover. This was something deeper, more venomous. You said you didn't know him, Chase said. I don't know him, she spat, the name laced with contempt. But I know what he represents. I know the blood that flows in his veins. The tainted, corrupt, self-serving Quartermain blood. The pieces were beginning to shift, but they still didn't form a coherent picture. Chase decided to take a shot in the dark, to tap into the well of Quartermain history he'd been forced to learn since moving to this town. Is this about money? An inheritance? A business deal that went wrong? Meredith let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. Money? You think this is about money? She looked at him with genuine pity. This is about justice. This is about a debt that's been owed for 30 years. A debt that Edward Quartermain thought he could bury with his money and his influence. The name of the family patriarch, long deceased, seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. What debt? Chase asked, his voice barely above a whisper. My name isn't Meredith Dawson, she said, her posture straightening, as if she were shedding a skin. Not really. That was the name given to me by the system after my mother died. A clean, new name for a dirty, old story. Her eyes glazed over, looking into a past only she could see. My mother's name was Sarah Weber. Chase's mind raced. The name was familiar, a footnote in the sprawling, chaotic history of Port Charles. Sarah Weber, a nurse. He remembered now from old case files. She had been involved with, his blood ran cold. Your father, Chase said, the realization dawning with horrific clarity. Your father was Francisco Frank Smith, she finished, her voice dripping with a lifetime of bitterness. The man Edward Quartermain paid to take the fall for a crime he didn't commit. The man he left to rot in prison. The man who was murdered behind bars because of a Quartermain's greed and cowardice. The story, an old and sordid one, came flooding back to Chase. Frank Smith, a low-level enforcer, had been set up by Edward Quartermain to cover for his own son's misdeeds. It was a classic Quartermain maneuver, use money and power to make a problem disappear. But this problem hadn't disappeared. It had festered. It had produced a daughter. My mother was pregnant with me when he went to prison, Meredith continued, her narrative cold and precise, as if she had rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head. She was shunned, destitute. She loved him, you see. Truly loved him. She believed he was innocent. She spent years trying to clear his name, writing letters, pleading with lawyers. The Quartermains made sure no one listened. They destroyed every piece of evidence, paid off every witness. They erased him. She leaned forward, her blue eyes now burning with a cold fire. My mother died of a broken heart and pneumonia in a rundown studio apartment when I was 8 years old. Her last words to me were, "Don't ever forget what they did to us." The Quartermains took everything. So, this is revenge, Kate stated. Revenge is such a petty word, she countered. This is reclamation. This is balance. I spent my life in foster care, watching the Quartermaines on the society pages, in the business news. Their charity galas, their corporate takeovers, their perfect, happy family. They built their empire on the corpse of my father's reputation and my mother's life. They never paid for what they did. She settled back, a strange serenity returning to her features. I knew I couldn't take on the whole family. Not directly. They're too powerful, too protected. But I could make them feel a pain as profound as the one they inflicted on me. I could take someone they loved. Someone vital. Why Drew? Chase asked, still struggling to connect the dots. He wasn't even raised as a Quartermaine. He's a relative newcomer to the family. Precisely, she said, a glint of triumph in her eye. And that's what made him perfect. He's the golden boy. The war hero. The one who brought renewed pride and honor to the name. He and his brother, Jason, are the future of the dynasty. Losing him wouldn't just be a tragedy, it would be a symbolic castration. It would show them that their legacy is fragile, that their money can't protect them from the ghosts of their past. And it would be the most painful blow to Monica Quartermaine, the matriarch who stood by her husband while he ruined my family. To lose a son, it's a pain she deserves to feel. The cold, meticulous logic of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a decades-long campaign, culminating in a single, violent act of psychological warfare. But you failed, Kate said bluntly. He's alive. For the first time, a genuine emotion flickered across Meredith's face, pure, unadulterated rage. It twisted her pretty features into something ugly and terrifying. A miscalculation, she hissed. The angle was wrong. A car door, a sudden movement, it was messy. I don't like mess. You were going to try again, Chase realized aloud. Of course, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. The plan was always a two-phase operation. The public shooting was phase 1, to instill terror, to show their vulnerability. Phase 2 was to be more intimate. More certain. I was getting closer, learning his routines, his patterns. He likes to run alone along the waterfront in the early mornings. It would have been easy. She looked at the two detectives, her expression now one of cool dismissal. But you got lucky with a fingerprint. A stupid, amateur mistake. I was tired. I'd been planning for so long. The confession hung in the air, stark and complete. The quiet graphic designer was gone, replaced by a creature of vengeance and meticulous hatred. The woman in the cream-colored sweater had just detailed her plan for cold-blooded murder with the detached air of a project manager reviewing a timeline. How did you learn to shoot? Chase asked, almost against his own will. He needed to understand the mechanics of this transformation. Meredith's smile returned, thin and cruel. The internet is a wonderful teacher, detective. And money, even a little bit of it, can buy you private lessons in places where they don't ask questions. I've been practicing for 5 years. I'm an excellent shot. As I said, the first attempt was a miscalculation, not a lack of skill. The interview room fell into a heavy silence. Chase looked at the woman before him, the orphaned daughter of a framed man and a heartbroken woman, a product of a system that had failed her, a vessel for a poison that had been brewing for 3 decades. She was a victim and a monster, a sympathetic figure and a remorseless killer. The cognitive dissonance he felt was overwhelming. I think I've said enough, Meredith said, her voice returning to its previous, soft cadence, as if she were flipping a switch. I'd like to speak to that lawyer now. Chase and Kate's exchanged a look. They had what they needed. More than they could have hoped for. They stood, the legs of their chairs scraping against the linoleum floor. As Chase reached for the door, Meredith spoke again. Detective? He turned back. Tell Monica Quartermaine that Frank Smith's daughter sends her regards, she said, her blue eyes gleaming with an unholy light. Tell her the past isn't dead. It's not even past. Chase walked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind him, sealing Meredith Dawson and her terrible truth inside. He leaned against the cool wall of the corridor, feeling drained, the weight of her story pressing down on him. Back in the bullpen, the news was already spreading. "The shooter's a woman?" Officer Rory Cabrera asked, his young face a mask of disbelief. "Meredith Dawson? Who the hell is that?" Chase didn't answer. He walked to his desk and sat down, staring at the blinking cursor on his computer screen. He had to start the report. He had to type the words that would send shockwaves through the city. The prime suspect in the attempted homicide of Drew Kane has been identified as Meredith Dawson, who has confessed to the act, citing a long-standing vendetta against the Quartermaine family stemming from the actions of the late Edward Quartermaine. It was more than just an arrest. It was the unearthing of a secret, the detonation of a bomb that had been buried for a generation. The fallout would be immense. The Quartermaines would be reeling, not just from the attack on Drew, but from the revelation of its source. The public's perception of the case would shift entirely. The narrative of a random, brutal shooting was gone, replaced by a gothic tale of legacy, sin, and the terrifying patience of a woman scorned by history. Across town, in the sterile, quiet room of the General Hospital ICU, Drew Kane was slowly regaining consciousness, unaware that the person who had tried to erase his future was a phantom from his family's past. And in the grand, silent mansion on the hill, Monica Quartermaine was pouring a glass of sherry, her heart still aching from the recent brush with death her son had endured. She had no idea that the name Frank Smith was about to re-enter her life, bringing with it a storm of consequences that Edward's money and influence could never have prevented. The identity was revealed. It was a woman. A quiet, unassuming, utterly ruthless woman. And for Port Charles, the revelation was just the beginning of the end. 3. The Port Charles community is still in shock after the devastating shooting that left Drew Kane fighting for his life, and now, the latest twist is sending shockwaves through everyone who thought they had the story figured out. For weeks, fans have speculated about who could have pulled the trigger, and while names like Cyrus Renaud, Valentine Cassadine, and even Jason Morgan floated around, no one expected the truth to take this stunning turn. In a jaw-dropping reveal, Drew's shooter has been identified, and it's a woman. The revelation leaves everyone reeling, as motives, alliances, and secrets begin to unravel in ways that could change Port Charles forever. Inside the hospital, chaos reigns as Drew slowly regains consciousness. His breathing is shallow, his body weak, but his mind races as flashes of the shooting replay in fragments. The sound of the gunshot, the glimpse of a shadow, the feeling of betrayal, it all comes back in waves. "She was there," Drew whispers hoarsely, catching Elizabeth's attention as she stands at his bedside. "Drew, what are you talking about?" she asks, brushing his hair away from his forehead. He stares at her, eyes wide, as if seeing something only he can. It wasn't who they think. It wasn't a man. It was a woman. Liz freezes, her eyes widening in disbelief. "A woman? Drew, are you sure?" He nods, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Meanwhile, at the PCPD, Dante and Jordan are locked in a tense conversation. "We've ruled out every male suspect tied to the warehouse," Dante says, flipping through a stack of reports. Cyrus's men, Valentine's contacts, even Sonny's old associates, none of them match the witness description. Jordan frowns. "Then who the hell are we missing?" Dante glances up, hesitating. "What if we're looking in the wrong direction?" Jordan arches a brow. "Meaning?" He exhales. "Meaning Drew wasn't shot by a man. We've been chasing the wrong trail entirely." Jordan leans back, arms crossed. "You think a woman did this?" Dante nods. "And I think I know who." Over at the Quartermaine mansion, Carly and Sam are at odds, their emotions running high as they try to piece together what happened. "You can't seriously think this was random," Carly insists, pacing the living room. "Someone wanted Drew silenced, and it has to connect to whatever he was digging into with Aurora." Sam shakes her head, tears in her eyes. "No, it doesn't make sense, Carly. Drew hasn't made enemies like that, not since he got out of Pentonville. He's been focused on work, on Scout, on trying to build something normal again." Carly stops pacing and faces her. "Normal doesn't exist in this town, Sam. You should know that by now. The two women exchange a knowing look, both haunted by memories of violence and betrayal that have marked their lives in Port Charles. Later that night, Dante knocks on Carly's door. "We found something," he says quietly. Carly motions him inside, tension instantly thickening. "What is it?" He hands her a photo from the crime scene, a grainy image captured by a nearby security camera. The figure is partially obscured, but there's no mistaking the silhouette, slender frame, long hair, gloved hands gripping the weapon. "Oh my God," Carly breathes. "It really was a woman." Dante nods grimly. "And we're close to figuring out who she is." Carly stares at the photo, her mind racing through possibilities, enemies old and new, women who had reasons to hate Drew, or perhaps someone who didn't even mean for him to be the target at all. At General Hospital, Drew wakes again, this time with more clarity. "She knew me," he says to Liz and Sam, who have been keeping vigil. "She wasn't some stranger off the street. When I saw her eyes, there was recognition, anger, maybe, but also fear." Sam leans forward, desperate for answers. "Drew, did you see her face?" He shakes his head weakly. "No." She was wearing a hood, but her voice, his eyes dart up suddenly. It sounded familiar. Liz exchanges a worried glance with Sam. "Do you remember anything she said?" He nods slowly. "She said, you shouldn't have come back." Sam's heart drops. "You shouldn't have come back?" The words echo in her mind. She looks at Liz, realization dawning. "Someone from his past," Sam whispers. "Someone who wanted Drew gone for good." But who? Meanwhile, Dante and Jordan follow the trail of evidence to a surprising lead, a woman with ties to both Cyrus Renault's organization and to Drew's military history. "This can't be coincidence," Jordan says, scanning the file. "She's been using multiple aliases, moving money through offshore accounts, and she showed up in Port Charles right before the shooting." Dante looks grim. "And guess what? She's already disappeared." Across town, Nina Reeves overhears Carly on the phone at the Metro Court. Carly's voice trembles as she says, Dante thinks they've found her. He says she used to work with Drew overseas. Nina's eyes widen. The words hit like a thunderbolt, not because she's directly involved, but because she remembers something from years ago. "Overseas?" Nina mutters to herself. She flashes back to a conversation she once had with Valentine about Drew's time as a Navy SEAL, about the classified missions, the people who never made it back, and one woman in particular who blamed Drew for everything. Could it be her? Back at the PCPD, Jordan calls Dante into her office. "We just got confirmation," she says quietly. "The shooter's name is Harper Lane. Former military, dishonorably discharged, and she served on a mission with Drew Kane." Dante frowns, trying to process. "So she's got a grudge?" Jordan nods. "A big one. Drew made a decision years ago that cost her brother his life. She's been off the radar ever since, until now." Dante rubs the back of his neck. "That explains motive. But how did she even get to Port Charles? Who helped her?" Jordan sighs. "That's what we need to find out next." Meanwhile, Drew is slowly piecing together fragments of memory. He remembers shouting, the flash of a weapon, and the sound of a woman's voice trembling with emotion. "You ruined everything," she had said. "You took my brother, and now I'll take you." He tells this to Sam and Liz, both stunned into silence. "So it's personal," Sam says softly. "Someone from your past." Drew nods. "But I thought she was dead." The news spreads quickly through Port Charles, and reactions vary from shock to outrage. Sonny, hearing it from Dante, clenches his jaw. A woman shooter? Ex-military? This is bad, Dante. Really bad. Whoever she's working with, it's not over. Dante nods. We're working on tracking her down before she makes another move. Sonny's expression hardens. Do it fast. Because if she's targeting people Drew cares about next, she's gonna have to deal with me. Over at Crimson, Nina can't focus on work. She keeps thinking about what she overheard and about Valentine's past connections. When Valentine shows up unannounced, her suspicion only grows. "You knew her, didn't you?" she demands. Valentine's face remains composed, but his silence says everything. "Nina, this isn't your fight," he finally says. "The woman you're talking about, Harper Lane, she's dangerous. She's not someone you want to get involved with." Nina glares at him. "So you did know her?" Valentine exhales. "She came to me months ago, asking for information about Drew. I told her to stay away. I didn't think she'd actually come to Port Charles."